I think we are live. Okay, we are live. Today, unfortunately, we don't have our opening person. My fake co-host is not here. He's tied. So let's I think we need because today is a hard conversation. I want us to start with just like 30 seconds of silence just to remember the people we've lost to suicide. So even me, who never keeps quiet, is gonna 30 seconds, then we can start. Okay, I have assumed they're done. Okay, so our conversation today, this month, is on suicide. Today we start with suicide amongst women. Next week we are gonna tackle suicide amongst men. The third week we are gonna tackle suicide amongst the young adults and teenagers. The statistics are grim. Every year we lose about 1 million people to suicide. And that's why we need to have this conversation and see what we can do so that um, we can prevent the losses to suicide. So let's start with, as usual, the definition. Let's start from the psych side, and then we'll go to the legal side. Shalom and Hamida, it's tapo style today. What is suicide?
Yeah, I mean, suicide is just basically when an individual ends or takes their own life, regardless of the reasons as to why they've taken their own lives. It's just one ending their own lives.
Shalom, do you want to add anything to that? Or okay, go ahead.
No, I mean, the description of suicide is basically that, just somebody ending their life.
Okay. Ayeta, do you have a funky law thing about suicide, or it's just that?
Yeah, suicide basically is just taking one's life voluntarily and intentionally. The word voluntarily has to be there and intentionally has to be there. So if you take your life and it's not voluntarily or intentionally, then that's not suicide. So it is taking one's life, yes, but it has to be voluntarily and intentionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from our setting, why are women let's do the terminology first, because I know we stopped saying committed suicide. Why did we change the terminology to died by suicide? Psychologist Tapo.
Hello?
Yeah, Hamida, go.
Ah, wow. Maybe you can take this one, my colleague.
Yeah, no problem. So you're asking, why did we change?
Yeah, why the suicide terminology? Why did we change it from from stopping to say committed suicide to die by suicide?
Oh,
I
wow.
think
Yes.
there was an element of removing stigma, because even committing is almost like an offense, and I think we have gotten to the place where we understand that, yes, much as there is voluntarily and intentionally committing that harm to yourself, because that's injurious harm where you harm yourself to the point of death. We have come to understand that it's caused by illness, and there's support that we can give somebody so that they can, like, reduce the risk of dying by suicide. And because of, I mean, like, let me just link it directly to depression. Because depression is an illness, suicide then becomes an outcome of that illness. That's why you're dying by suicide. So I think it was to help us almost like understand it, explain it, and even accept that it is not something that people do. I don't know. I think we're going to get into what society basically says about it. But people who are struggling with the idea of ending their own lives would be made to feel even more guilty when they're told, what are you doing to your parents? What are you going to do to your children? What do you think this is going to? And it didn't help matters at all. So I think when we change to dying by suicide, we are accepting it as a form of death as a result of various things that we can look into. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Ayeta,
think,
in the eyes of Hamida, go ahead.
yeah, I totally agree. It's actually meant to remove blame from the person who has passed on, because it was about, it sounded like we are blaming the person who has taken their own life without understanding what their struggle was and where they were coming from in order for them to take that action. Yeah.
Ayeta, in the eyes of the law, are we dying by suicide or we are committing suicide?
Unfortunately, in the eyes of the law, we are still committing suicide. Unfortunately, we are still doing it voluntarily. And I support the mental health practitioner, the psychologist, on the issue of stigma and all that. Because even if you look at the word voluntarily and intentionally, when you are depressed, when you are going through some mental illness, the idea of just doing something voluntary, you don't even have informed consent. So you really do not even have the capacity to kill yourself by informed consent. So yes, suicide is legally, we are still saying committing suicide, because we've really not changed the whole concept and all that. But unfortunately, we are saying voluntarily, and and we are already at the point where we have already come to accept that this is not something that anybody does voluntarily. And informed consent, you need to have all that. Your head has to be proper and all that. And by the time you're committing suicide, clearly you need help. It's a cry for help. So you are not actually doing it voluntarily. So the law needs to catch up, yes, but we have not caught up to that yet.
Okay. And so why are women dying by suicide? Shalom, we can start with you.
Wow.
Your face was over there, so you had to, yeah.
I think we need other faces over here. But, when we ask why, it assumes that we have the reason. We understand the reason. And I think any attempt to answer that why would mean that we can stop it. But I think it's such a wide range of reasons that I can't even say I have the answer why. I don't know whether I could confidently answer this is why. However, coping has become one of the difficult things to do in this life right now. And expectations that fall on women in particular are high, and they're increasing by the day. So already when we look at what it takes to just survive in this world, regardless of whether you're a woman, man, child, etc., there's a whole lot. But we haven't stopped loading women with that expectation to deliver the way. Let me just give an age. A 1950s woman was surviving. The 2020 woman is also supposed to survive the same way. Therefore, they're expected to be serving, subservient, cooking, managing their household, managing everything that there is, and at the same time contributing to the finances of the home, managing their children. I mean, there's basically a lot of demand on the woman. And while that demand is coming, I think support has reduced. The way we had villages, and I use villages loosely to mean communities around women who could help them, manage their children, manage a lot of these things. I think we become a lot more individualistic. So the expectations are still fully loaded, but the support system has totally reduced. So I think it's getting women to a place where they get pushed to a corner and feel I have no other way out. And then, of course, there is the fact that there has been a lot of, should I say, illustrations, communication, media in terms of movies. The more we have reduced the stigma, the more we have talked about it, and therefore inadvertently also created that as an option. Because if we look at why is it, the commonalities around suicide as listed by Dr. Schneidman, when we look at what somebody is trying to do with suicide is to run away. And previously we could run away to community, we could run away to our mothers and aunties, we could run away to our friends. Now that community does not exist, at least not the way it used to. And so we are finding women pushed to a corner and thinking, you know what, I'm better off not here. And so that could be one of the reasons why.
Hamida?
I think I would like to look at it from, both nature and nurture. If you look at nature, our biological, journey as women already puts us on a path where we come across, challenges that our counterparts, the men, do not experience. If you look at, women or girls going through periods, then we are the ones who are getting pregnant, which comes with its own hormonal changes. And we've talked about, perinatal depression. When you look at this woman after giving birth, the process of giving birth, we have women who go through it and they have a very difficult time and they end up struggling with their mental health. And then, there is now raising the children. I mean, and most of that actually falls on us. And then you look at the, menopause journey again until the end. I mean, we have a lot of, things that we have to deal with as women right from the beginning, as biologically, right? So if you look at the nurturing as well, in many societies, if you look at the journey of a girl, in many parts of the world, we are raised to be carers. So right from the time a girl is born, you'll find it that in some cultures, they're expected to start doing the house chores, taking care of the siblings. That comes with a lot of pressure because if you don't do it the way the society expects you to do it, there are consequences. So you can see already there is anxiety there. Yeah, if I ask people in this forum to raise up their hands, especially the women who have so many responsibilities, who had to start taking care of their families at a younger age, I'm sure many hands will go up. Then the same nurturing, the place of a woman, the place of a girl, it's like you're then seeing.
Okay, Hamida has hung on my end. Is that true?
Lesser than
Okay.
by the society. Girls. Hello, hello.
So, no, so Hamida, I think you might need to come off camera because the bandwidth is a bit low.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just
Okay.
just come off camera. Yeah.
All right. I'll do that. Right. So talking about the environment as well, you'll find that where a woman's place is in some society, we are meant to be lesser than the man. It's like when it comes to making major decisions and all that, then we are disadvantaged. You find that many women also struggle with low economic status, because they don't have maybe a means to raise, a lot of money, or even they are not even economically independent. They tend to rely on men, and you know what that means, to rely on another person in order for you to survive. I mean, that puts you at a major disadvantage, you know. Socially, you find that maybe many girls do not go to school, or maybe when they go to school, they don't reach the level that the boys reach, and then in that way they are disadvantaged. I'm not just talking about our Kenyan women, but generally speaking, also the exposure to abuse as children. You find that when it comes, for example, to sexual abuse, the girls tend to be more abused than the boys. So you can see that that child has a disadvantage growing up with that kind of trauma. When it comes to IPV, intimate partner, violence, again, the woman is mostly at the disadvantage. when we have, family conflicts, when you're talking about, for example, property, you'll find that in some cultures, even here in Kenya, the boys or the men have the right to inherit property, but we are not allowed to inherit simply because of our gender, which is absolutely unfair. Also the risk of family history of suicide that also can contribute to more cases of suicides for women. And when I'm talking about all these challenges that we go through, then it means that then we become much more vulnerable to falling into the trap of struggling with different mental health issues, and mainly depression. And we know that when people struggle with severe depression, then that's when we are talking about suicide. Many women are the ones who are struggling with depression, eating disorders as well. And you may find that some people now end up numbing themselves by using different substances that also may increase the risk of suicide. So very many, the journey of a woman, there are so many barriers, very many bumps on the way through nature and nurturing that puts us at a higher risk of finding ourselves being, of course, the men, when we talk about the gender, of course, differences when it comes to suicide, men are the ones who commit suicide more when it comes to the percentages, yeah? But women are the ones who attempt more. When it comes to suicidal attempts, it's the women, but the ones who fully commit suicide or not commit suicide, but die by suicide are the men, yeah.
Austin, because I've seen you here and you know me, I'm gonna ask. Do you want to chime in a bit? I know you're slated to come next week to discuss the male suicide ideations and death by suicide. But do you want to chime in, or you are in Bunyore?
As always, I'm in Bunyore.
Okay. Okay. Would you like to chime in, please?
I think the last point, just to emphasize, in terms of the difference in ideation and the actual act itself. So there are usually gender differences. More women will present with a lot on ideation, but in terms of the reported acts of suicide, you'll find it is more men who do it. A lot of times when we work with clients who are suicidal, we always have to ask about the ideation. We ask about the intention itself. If someone has considered the method and the lethality of that method, and if they have a plan in terms of actually doing it. So you'll find men tend to have more lethal methods compared to women.
Is it just because they are men? Or why do they have more lethal methods?
A lot of times I also got to do with the environment in which we are at. So you'll find access to the lethal methods. I think men tend to use it more compared to women. So you find, for example,
Watu wa Bunyore. Okay. Okay. Austin has amepotea kidogo. So we'll let's tackle the issue of suicidal ideation and the difference between ideation and this there are people who constantly think about dying by suicide, and there are people who it goes in and out. Shalom and Hamida, would you care to just touch on that bit? The ideation versus action.
Okay, maybe as Shalom waits to join. When you talk about ideation, just from the word ideation, it's from the word idea. It's thoughts a person having thoughts of suicide, they may think that this life is not for me, I can't do this anymore. Some of them may actually have a plan of how they would want to proceed with suicide, how they want to die by suicide. So you might find that some of them actually have a very clear plan. So ideation is one, but once somebody dying by suicide is a different is the next step. So as psychologists, of course, we always check on suicidal ideations, and also check on how severe that is, so that we can know what step to take, because sometimes they just have these thoughts, and you'll find, many people have those ideas. I'm sure, many of you will say, there's that time I was thinking of suicide, not very intensely, but I had thoughts about suicide, but I never thought about how I would do that, or even had a concrete plan on what steps to take in order for this person to take their own lives. So we have the differences in the idea, which are the thoughts, and then going through the plan is the next step. Yeah.
Shalom.
I could add that women by nature also discuss their intentions. And so they're more likely to sit with an idea for a longer time than men are. Men are naturally action-oriented. So by the time they think about something, the space between ideation and actually taking action is actually shorter. And like Dr. Austin was saying, they have access to lethal methods. Again, pain, the thought of, I think, and Dr. Hamida had talked about nurture. Because women have many people who are dependent on them, they think more about them than the man who will actually now take action a bit more immediately. So you find that they sit around with the idea, like both the doctors have said, the idea is something that has to start before the action is taken. The idea is what we assess, and we just see severity, clarity, how clear is somebody about how they're going to execute that particular death. And so you find women will sit with it longer, and therefore that's why they get stuck a bit in the ideation before they take the action. And then they will also attempt it. And because of something like a pain threshold and of course access to lethal methods, the attempts, as had been mentioned earlier, the women will attempt more and the men succeed more, in the process.
Okay, I'm just wondering about self-harm, which is, I think we'll tackle it more when we do the adolescent one. If you could touch on self-harm, because most of the adolescents who practice, I don't know if practice self-harm is the correct word, but practice self-harm are usually the female adolescents. Does this carry over to the females who end up either attempting or dying by suicide? Shalom, your face is there, so yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm finding that boys are really catching up with girls when it comes to self-harm. So I'm getting a whole lot more cases of boys who are self-harming. And so we are almost getting to a place where there's a balance. Now, whether they will be the ones who get into, now the girls in particular, like you're asking, are they the ones who then get onto the place of women who will self-harm? I'm not sure because
Shalom, just let's break it down for the people. Me and you can say self-harm and go on. But what exactly is self-harm? I'm sorry, I'm done. We just break it down, and then and you can give an example. I don't want us to talk about the examples because of the fear of contagion of suicide, but just talk about self-harm and then continue with your chain of thought.
Okay. So self-harm is, if we just take it, borrow it from what those two words that make it up say, it's causing harm to the self. Now, in terms of how you would do it, the self-harm that most people know about is cutting, where you will take something sharp and cause lacerations on your skin, different parts of the skin. Sometimes it goes deep enough to draw blood, and sometimes it can be like now the extreme that now comes to the death by suicide is when you have slit it enough to bleed to death. So that's the common one that people know as far as harming the self is cutting. But then there are other forms. There's burning. There's different forms of self-harm. But instead of just looking at what are all the types of self-harm we can do, it's causing pain to oneself and mainly to numb the psychological pain one is going through. So a lot of the time, self-harm will be physical, and it's to numb the psychological pain that somebody is going through, right? So now in adolescence, what we have seen a whole lot of is the cutting, the one where they would be basically taking a sharp thing and cutting around their wrists, their arms, all the way up their arms. They cut along the thighs, they cut their stomach, they cut in different places. And so you find eventually this may grow to the point where the pain tolerance is getting higher and higher, and therefore death by suicide results when a cut is actually that much deeper. Because by the time somebody has been self-harming for several years, the pain becomes tolerable. And because they're not dealing with the psychological pain, that is intensifying. So as the psychological pain is intensifying, the physical pain is becoming tolerable, and therefore the risk of it getting more severe in terms of the harm or to self getting more severe then is high. I don't have the research that would prove or say that girls who self-harm become women who die by suicide. So I wouldn't say that that is the case. But again, I find that girls who self-harm, because they are seeking help at some point, may end up not being women who will die by suicide. And I have found women who have died by suicide who never self-harmed as a child. So self-harm doesn't have to be the prerequisite to dying by suicide in women. We are finding that the more suicide is becoming an option, the more there are women who are committing suicide or killing themselves by suicide and not having had self-harm before. So I wouldn't use self-harm as a telltale for women.
Okay. Hamida, I want you to tackle the issue of murder-suicide. Who does this and why do they do this?
Mothers, moms?
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. I mean, of course, like we've talked about, genetics, we have, women who are already predisposed to mental health conditions. So you find that they may struggle quite a bit. And I've had, several patients coming in, especially after giving birth, they're really struggling with, postnatal depression. And when I do my assessments, I find that some of them, have a history already predisposed to mental health challenges. So you may find that, if somebody is genetically predisposed to different mental health conditions, they are at a higher risk of committing suicide as opposed to the next woman. And of course, something else that I'm finding is, being in very toxic relationships. I am experiencing, in my sessions, women who are either having a relationship or marriage to narcissistic, partners who take them through hell, and they end up losing themselves and losing their self-esteem, and they end up feeling like, life is not worth living. Of course, the other factor is that economically, some of the women feel completely overwhelmed. It's like, my children are asking for food, and every single day I'm struggling. I'm going to look for casual jobs to put a meal on the table, and I'm not able to do it. We've heard of cases where women have drowned their own children and drowned themselves, or killed themselves simply because they feel overwhelmed that they cannot afford to take care of their families. We also have an increase in single mothers meaning that, you know, the responsibility falls squarely on that particular woman, which can be very overwhelming. We have cases, increasing cases of, you know, addiction, especially for our men. So you find that they're not present in the homes, and the women are the ones who are trying so hard to keep the families going. And, you know, men, when the men are going to drink, when they come back, they expect food, they come with violence. So we have so many situations where women are struggling. Of course, hormonal issues as well. You know, sometimes we have women who are really struggling with different hormonal challenges. They're not able to, you know, to manage their emotions, you know, and it can be a real struggle when somebody is going through that, and that they may be, you know, at a higher risk of dying by suicide. Yeah.
Okay. Shalom, unless you want to add something on the mother suicide bit.
Was it mother or mother?
Did I say mother? Mother, she wrote.
Oh,
Yeah, mother.
yes. I had mother.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Mother suicide. D for dog. That one, yes.
Yeah. Maybe just to add a little,
Mhm.
I find that, and because we're talking about suicide by women, and in terms of the complexities of suicide around women's space, by the time a woman is choosing to take her own life, I think she has tried everything she believes is within her power, right? And back again to the whole nurturing aspect of women, a woman who's likely to commit that particular, you know, it's called a crime. And I don't feel like it's a crime. It's just looking for a solution. By the time a woman is getting there, she's probably feeling that nobody will be left who can take care of her children. And therefore, she's doing her, I'll put that in quotes, doing her children a favor to get them out of this world. So I have not felt as though it is really killing the children out of malice. It is just looking for a solution. I'm unable to take care of them in this world. Nobody is there for us. Therefore, you know what? Let us all just die. And therefore, you'll find the mother killing the children and then taking her own life. It is done as an act of love, if I may call it that. However much you would want to assess that, it's an act of love towards the people that she's also killing. However, there's cases where we have had the murder suicide tie happening when there's anger. And the lady then kills her spouse or partner and then takes her own life. It's a case of, you know what, because suicide is also as a result of anger turned inwards, can be as a result of anger turned inwards. So when they're angry, you'll have the homicide suicide situation where they kill their partner and then take their own lives just to be done with this whole story, you know? So that's what I would say to it. The motivations are different. Some can be acts of love, where especially when we see a murder suicide that involves children, but then a lot of the time when we see it involving a partner, it's usually an act of anger.
Okay. Hamida, now that you know it's mother and not mother, do you have any anything else to add?
Yeah, I think it's just it's what Wandia has said, that Munyeri, sorry, has said. I think just the examples are given of what women go through. It is the same reasons that make women, you know, take lives of their loved ones, especially children, and then take the lives of and take their own lives. So and of course, I've heard of the relationship between women being in prison for committing murder, and that being related to a man, you know, who somewhere it's like, you know, there's a way that our relationship with men tends to put us in situations where we are the ones who are committing that murder and ending up in trouble. Yes. So basically, suicide murder suicide situations is women, I think, who feel overwhelmed and they see that as a solution. And I've also heard of cases where women have used that as a punishment for their partners, because this is what you're doing. You're going to get a second wife. Okay, I'm going to do this, and you'll never have peace in your life. So that has also, been seen as a reason. Yeah, but mainly it's women feeling overwhelmed in different situations and choosing that as a solution. But suicide, of course, is never the answer. Yeah.
Ayeta, does the law care that we were doing it in anger, we were in pain, when we let's say it's a botched murder suicide plot, what does the law care?
First of all, before we even get to the murder suicide, I would like to just specify that in Kenya, committing suicide is not a crime. You're already dead. So it's not a crime, it's not whatever. So there's nobody who is going to be charged for committing suicide. However, you will be charged for attempting to commit suicide. And this is where, as the two specialists have discussed, the ladies usually have the ideation more than the men. This is where it comes into play that women are usually charged more, because they're the ones who usually attempt to commit suicide more than the men. Because committing suicide is not a crime, but attempting to commit suicide is a crime punishable by 2 years imprisonment or a fine, or in most cases, both. So when it comes to murder suicide, a lot of things are taken into account, because for you to commit a crime, be it a murder, be it any other crime, there has to be two elements. There has to be an intention to do that, and then an action. So the intention goes, the action kind of plays into the preparation you made towards committing the supposed murder. So if you just had an intention and you did not commit the crime, then you cannot be charged for it. But this is where the provocation element comes in. Sometimes you go to a place and your partners provoke you and stuff like that, and you end up killing them. So there was no intention, there was no preparation for it, but you committed the action. So this is where you find people being sentenced for manslaughter, with even being sentenced for as less as a year or something like that. However, if there was an intention and an action, and the action was put into plan, a plan was foreseen, and you see, for instance, if you go and find your husband perhaps sleeping with a woman, and you go from that place, you find them in the bedroom, you kill the woman or the husband immediately, then that would be a manslaughter. That would, it is an action without an intention. You did not intend to kill them, you just found them like that. But if you find them like that and you go to the kitchen to grab a knife, you have already space to think about it. You go grab a knife, come back to the bedroom and kill. You see, that space of time, that 1 minute, as much as you are not mentally liable as per se, but that 1 minute is enough for you to have decided how you're going to commit the crime, with what tool and all that, and then you go back and kill. So murder suicide is usually considered on how it went about, what was the provocation, how did you commit the crime, if it was intentional, if you had time to think about it, or if it was immediate, if it was accidental. And that is why you find different people are being sentenced maybe for life, and others will get as few as even a year or months. So the intention and action have to be really, really come into play when it is considered a murder suicide.
Okay. So Shalom and Hamida, then walk us through this. Why would one decide to die by suicide? I know we say it's to relieve the pain. Why can't I just go take maramoja, or go sleep, or go for a jog? Why do I decide to end it all? What's happening in the brains of people dying by suicide? I know we studied the ones whose suicidal attempts fail, but help us understand this.
I think besides the pain that could be tangible, that hopelessness that is in the mind, that emotion of I'm helpless, I can't do anything, that's pretty hard to remedy quickly. It is something that would require, the therapy. Sometimes, like in the case of depression, will require medication to sort of balance those hormones before getting to the place where, they can have now the therapy. So why? When we ask what can we do about it? I think one of the things to do is support. Let's start by looking out for the woman, looking out there and finding out what's going on. We talked about the just after the postnatal. That in fact somebody has called it here the fourth trimester. After the child is born, are we supporting that mom? Whenever a mom loses a job, whenever a girl gets pregnant, whenever, if we are talking to each other through this process, then the pain will become a lot more bearable. But sometimes we do not know. And so in the cases where we have people who have died by suicide and we had no idea what they were going through, as much as possible, it's to get to the place where you're sharing this information. You see, like what we are doing, Posa, now, having a conversation and saying, you know what, we need to talk about this. Let's normalize having this conversation so that anybody who's thinking about it can feel there is hope. So that thing of hopelessness and helplessness, when somebody is feeling that deep inside, it's very hard to take it off. But when we are having conversations about it, somebody can say, you know what, I'm not the only one. Let's share as much as possible the struggles that we're going through, because it's going to be, I can't look at you, Posa, right now and say, you know what, you might be thinking about it. You would need to tell me, or I would need to observe behavior. So I think that's the other thing, getting all of us as society to understand the telltale signs when it comes to suicide. Who is likely to get there, even if we're not going to get there 100%? Can we reduce the number as much as possible? Yeah, I think that's what I would put in for now. That's what we can do.
Okay, Hamida, the same question. What's happening? Help us understand.
I think mostly, women go through all these challenges and they end up, suffering from mental health conditions that they are not aware of. Because of lack of awareness about mental health, you may find that many people are struggling and yet they don't know that they are struggling from a mental health condition. So they keep pushing with life, they keep dealing with their stressors until they reach a point where they feel that they cannot cope anymore. And they see suicide as a solution. And like I've said, suicide is never the answer. So if somebody, for example, a woman is suffering from severe depression, yeah, it means that one of the criterias of depression, one of the features of depression is somebody feeling suicidal. But if this person doesn't know that this is what is happening to them, then they may think that actually what is going on in their minds is actually truth. Because simply because I have a thought doesn't mean that this is true. Simply because my mind is telling me to throw myself, on the road to get hit by a car, doesn't mean that that is the right thing to do. So we need to create a lot of awareness about mental health. We need to have mental health first aid, trainings where we're educating people about, the different, mental health conditions and how they look like, so that we are each other's keepers, or we just take care of ourselves. The minute I start, going down that route of being depressed, I have a slight idea that I'm not okay and that I need help. So creating awareness is key. Many people are not aware that they're suffering from depression or other, psychological disorders. They are being blamed for being lazy or acting, weird if they're suffering from bipolar or they're suffering from borderline. It's like you're being told you're being kicked out of school or all those situations. And people don't know that it is a mental health condition that actually needs to be addressed by professionals. So I would say that we need to really take mental health issues very seriously and create a lot of awareness. I believe that this would be very helpful in our communities.
Okay. And as someone thinks through the question Mary Achakalong has put out there, what is your opinion on the forgotten boy child? How does this tie in with the future woman's mental health? What are your projections on the impact of current related movements on women's mental health? As we digest that whole question, I want us to think about protective factors. What protects women from dying by suicide? I know one of them is religion, but I just want us to put the religion in a different bucket on its own. But let's talk about what are the protective factors?
I'll start by saying educating ourselves. Like I've said, about mental well-being. Because it doesn't matter how much we run away from mental well-being, it's part of us. There's physical health and mental health. We can't run away from that. So educating ourselves is very important. Attending forums where they're talking about mental health is very important, so that we also reduce or work on the stigma that comes with mental health issues. And of course, when it comes to suicide, there's quite a big stigma, especially in our community, where people can even get isolated by the rest of the community, because maybe your family is seen to be as if it's been cast. So there's a lot of taboo that we need to address when it comes to mental health, when it comes to suicide. That's one of the things that we can do. Of course, empowering our women when it comes to economics. So to make sure that at least we have projects for women, or we have programs where women have access to financial security, where they're able to take care of themselves and not rely on the men necessarily. And I know that sometimes women, I've heard of cases where women are staying in an abusive relationship simply because they have no financial means to go out and take care of themselves, or be able to pay for their children's school fees. So economical empowerment, I believe, is a very important factor. And also, as much as we are talking about mental health, we will find that access to mental health treatment is also a barrier, because sometimes, or majority of the Kenyans, for example, they don't have the insurance to go to the hospital or to go to a mental health provider. So that becomes a barrier. We need to have programs where there's access to mental health services, and also the insurances, having packages for mental health, so that everybody can have access to mental health support. Because sometimes people suffer from mental health, but they don't know where to go. How does it start? If you ask a person who is a counselor, they don't know. Who is a psychologist, they don't know the difference between a counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist. We need to start making these things as accessible as possible. Coping skills. We need also to teach our people about how they can cope, with challenging situations, problem solving skills. We need to teach, some of these things right from primary school, or high school, so that our children can grow up knowing that, there are ways that I can be able to take care of myself, even before I reach out to somebody else who is an expert to be able to support me. Yeah. So, and also, I think also our government has a huge responsibility to make sure that they address this issue of suicide. It's criminal, and it's they need to address that, so that people can open up and look at it as a cry, something that can be worked on, that there are solutions. You find that sometimes people attempt to take their own lives, and they survive, and then they live a very full life after that, because something has been done, they've been taken care of, and they're feeling way much better. So it is mainly because of somebody being sick and not because somebody is choosing to take their own life. Yeah.
Shalom, same question. What are the protective factors?
I think what I would do is just add a few to what Dr. Hamida has said. And one of them is hobbies. I want to start with hobbies because women tend to be so busy doing everything else for everybody else except themselves, and therefore end up not doing stuff for fun. Once upon a time, self-care used to be going to the spa and all that, but today that is grooming. We need to show up, okay? So we need to show up with our nails, hair, etc. done well. So self-care does not include, okay, it can include, but it does not constitute just doing your nails and things. So I think women need to find hobbies that they can do, places where they can exert energy, socialize. So I think the other connection I would add is the other thing I would add is brighter connections, like people who are going to uplift them, make them laugh, make them just relax, just something as simple as just rest. And I think some of this can also be included in the coping skills that was talked about earlier, because sometimes even just sleep is enough. Just having a good night's sleep often enough is actually going to reduce the pressure and the stress that we have as a part of coping. So sleeping, hobbies, positive relationships with other people, learning how to ask for help, all those are protective, right? And then, of course, there's a preemptive of don't take on more than you can actually handle. So learning how to set boundaries, again, that's a coping skill. Learning how to actually say no. Women tend to feel as though if they say no, so if I look at the career woman, and I use that term loosely, the woman in the corporate space has been led to believe that if they turn down certain tasks, then other people will be passed. I mean, they will be passed and the job, task, promotion, etc., will be passed on to another employee. So they end up saying yes to things that they should not be saying yes to. That also is seen at home, where the woman is saying yes to everything, every club that the child needs to be attending or feels like attending. The woman feels she's only one to run the children there or organize how it's going to happen. So boundaries, just learning how to set and assert our own boundaries is something that would be very protective. Yeah, they say no is a complete sentence.
It is. Ayeta, do you, I know we are not treating you as chopped liver here, but do you have any addition there? I know you're our lawyer today, but yeah.
Yes, I would like section 60, chapter 63 criminalizes attempt to commit suicide. So I would like as one of the protective measures is for the government to decriminalize attempt to commit suicide so that people are able to actually seek help, because some people do not seek help because they know once they seek help and they've attempted to commit suicide, it will be criminalized and they'll be reported. Fortunately for us, doctors are not allowed to give out personal information and they're not able to report them. But just knowing that the law protects you and you, because we have seen that suicide is voluntary and something that you do voluntarily. And from what Dr. Hamida and the other lady has said, clearly there's no voluntariness when you get to the point where you're committing suicide. You don't even do it by yourself and all that. So the law needs to protect everyone. Fortunately, the Mental Health Task Force has been in cohort and has tried to amend that, and we hope that the penal code will be amended to safeguard such issues so that people are not prosecuted for attempting to commit suicide. Instead, they are given the mental care that they deserve, because at the end of the day, this is a mental health issue. You can't criminalize it and you can't start punishing people for seeking help, because once you get to a point where you really want to commit suicide, even the law cannot really help, as in there's nothing the law can do. So, and also the things that the other Dr. Hamida and Shalom said, I personally do a lot of self-care. I'm a personal traveler. I do a lot of things by myself and community. And just to point out one thing that the Dr. Hamida and Shalom didn't point out, a lot of people, especially the women nowadays, are also getting depressed and trying to commit suicide because of infertility. Infertility has become such a big thing, and because it's a societal thing and people are not really addressing it. So we have had cases, issues of people trying to commit suicide because of infertility and of course, matrimonial property and stuff like that. Thank you.
Okay, then let's tackle the bucket of religion. When I put on my other hat, the one I dumped a long time ago of medicine, we were told that religion is protective. But I'm just wondering, with the advent of most people moving, many people actually abandoning religion, is religion still a protective factor? And today we are very glad we have our Muslim sister here, so we'll have the Christian point of view and the Islamic point of view. And since Eid ilikuwa juzi and I did not get mahamris from you, Hamida, we start with you.
Pole sana, tapata maamri ukija. So, wow, yeah, of course, in Islam, committing suicide is seen as a very, very, very serious, it's a sin. It's a big sin. And of course, when we say it's a big sin, you find that many people work very hard to find other solutions to deal with their problems. It's like they want to exhaust everything else. And it's like even when you have suicidal thoughts, it's hard for you to discuss them with anybody because, people will be, the way they will react is like, they'll, most people will cast the Satan once you start talking about, ideas about suicide. So I know I have had to go to different forums to talk about suicide, especially in our community, and say, talk about it, look at it as a mental health condition. But I know that helps many not to go through it. You have the ideas, you have the ideation, but you don't go through the whole process and, take your own life. So in that way, it acts as a protective factor. But also we have the other side of that, where people then don't feel comfortable to talk about their suicidal thoughts because it's looked at, from a very negative perspective. So they keep all these things boiling in and they struggle by themselves and they end up committing suicide simply because our religion says you're not supposed to commit suicide. Doesn't mean that Muslims do not commit suicide. They do every single day. They do. Yeah. And mainly it's because of the stigma that comes with it. So it is a protective factor. It helps a lot. It helps us a lot because, when you think about the circle of control, that's how we look at it, that there are things I'm able to handle as a human being. And there are many other things, other stressors that I just need to let go of, and God will take care of that. So having a higher being, as part of our support system is a good thing. Being able to know that there are things that as human beings we'll be able to handle and other things that we will never maybe be able to figure out, and it's okay, is a good thing. It's a protective factor. Yeah.
Shalom tutetee sisi wa Kristo.
Sijui kama nitawatetea because you see, first we are human and then we become whatever, Christian and everything else. Also, similarly to Islam, even in Christianity, which is what I know a bit more of, suicide is seen to be sinful, right? Taking your own life is seen to be sinful. It is talked about in the Bible because there's several people who basically died by suicide in the Bible. And when we look at somebody like, I think, King Saul, his was because of shame. He could not imagine the enemy taking him. So he thought, you know what? And he tried to tell his armor bearer, to kill him. And the armor bearer refused. So he died by suicide. And then the armor bearer also took his own life. But when we look at all that, if I look at religion today, Christianity today, I have talked to several people, both in practice and personal friends, who say the only reason why they are alive is because they are Christian. Because there was this idea that was put in our heads that if you die by suicide as a Christian, it's a one-way ticket to hell. And so because they're afraid of hell, then they will not take their own lives because they believe that's what's going to happen. So that is protection through fear. I would say the fear of God. And that the minute you get then to understand God's grace and things like that, it is now making people say, you know what, I still can. That's one. But then the other thing that I find, and which I prefer to lean towards, is the fact that there's somebody greater than us. There's somebody we can take our problems to, that if I feel the whole world has let me down, there is still God to go to. So I find religion being protective in that sense, that when you have a relationship with God, when you have somebody that you sincerely believe and you can go pray to, you are one more prayer away from giving up. And therefore, it slows down the process as much as possible. Again, are Christians committing suicide? 100% yes. Because this life, the earth is not Christian, the earth is not Islam, the earth is brutal human earth with everything that's coming at us. And so sometimes you're not able to just fall back on that religion or fall back on your faith in good enough time to survive the suicide. And so people are left saying, I wish they had asked, I wish we had understood their prayer, etc. I have had people within the church setting, not necessarily direct friends, but people that I have interacted with, choosing to die by suicide, and they succeed. Now, when they have succeeded, one of the things that we know is that they have rested from the torment, the mental torment that they were having. But now religion comes to start judging them. And I think, like Hamida said, because of that reaction, then people end up not sharing. And therefore, for me, I'm seeing religion contributing also to people struggling and ending up dying by suicide. Because then we have judged our fellow humans so much that they won't even come to us for help. So we are too religious. We are just speaking Christianese. When somebody comes and says they're thinking of just taking their own lives, we start casting demons out of them. That is pushing people away. So this religion that's supposed to be protective, on the one hand can be protective because of the fear of God. And also, the fear of God is a bit on the negative. And then there is the going to God for support and help. But at the same time, this same religion is pushing people away who would like help. So kind of like a bit double-edged, but I think it is more protective than it is harmful. Yeah.
Okay. I know I've shared a link on QPR. It's question, persuade, refer. It's a training. It's free, by the way, that I've done online, that if anyone can do, at least, anyone can do. It will help you and it will help us. But on the QPR bit, what should we do when, these people who post online that they've lost it, they want to die by suicide, or someone who's in an active suicidal ideation and wants to die by suicide? Help us help them. And Shalom, you're on my screen, so let's start with you.
Okay. The first thing we're supposed to do when somebody expresses the desire to end their own life is to ensure in whatever space you are at that this person is safe, right? So first thing to do is basically ensure that they're safe. So you can't just leave them and say, okay, let me go, I'm coming back. Hand them over to somebody who's going to watch them, the whole suicide watch. Questioning includes things like asking how they intend to do it. And I think we had mentioned that a bit at the beginning, where we are talking about asking somebody, what's your plan? And not just what's your plan in terms of being very logical and practical about it. It's just to get the idea of, has this person thought this through enough? In what's the severity? How much clarity do they have that they are willing to follow through with this? So it's to ask them. So keep them safe, then ask them, And then many times, and I like what Dr. Hamida said, we need to be doing first aid. We need to teach people first aid as far as managing suicide is concerned. Are we able to then take them to somebody else? And I'm looking at this from a layman point of view, because a lot of the time, it's not, psychologists are not the ones who see the most people. It is the normal laymen who are actually interacting with people who are attempting or considering to attempt suicide, to kill themselves. And so you find that as much as possible, refer them to somebody, get somebody else to help. When it comes to children, and I think we'll get into detail of that later, children, spouses, do not take a woman if she's contemplating killing herself back home if home has been the place that is causing the stress. That ends up not being a safe space. And that's what now questioning does. So instead of just thinking, okay, let me refer you, ask so that you can know how best to refer this person. Referral is not always just to a mental health practitioner as much as to the help that they may need at that point in time. It's a case of, if I go home, he's going to kill me, I'd rather kill myself. So don't take them home. So I think when it comes to a layman's point of view, what is it that you're going to do? How can we help? Is as much as possible, figure out, ask this person in the nicest way what they're thinking, how they can request how they would need your help, and then take them to somebody who can assist them a bit more than you can. Yeah, that's on the layman. You say your people are from where? That place that they're from.
Oh, my village this week.
Yeah.
Humailo. This week it's Humailo.
Humailo. So somebody from Humailo needs to just find out, what's going on, how are you planning on doing it, give them, get somebody else to support that process, and then refer them to the help that they need.
Okay. Hamida, same question. Please help my Humailo people. Humailo is at the mile, you can tell.
Oh, Humailo. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. So basically, of course, I like what Shalom has said. You do not leave that person alone, especially for, it doesn't matter whether I'm a professional or I'm a layman. If somebody is threatening to commit suicide, we need to take it seriously, because we don't know what is going on in their minds. We have no way of knowing how serious they are. So the best thing to do is to seek help. Don't leave them alone. If you're able to call somebody, a loved one, or take them to the nearest hospital, as long as you've put them in a professional setup where there is care, then you have played your part. Because sometimes you have people who are telling you that they're suicidal, and we don't take them seriously. We start giving them advice. They don't need that advice at that point, or asking them why they want to do it. They don't want those questions. They've made up their mind that if they've made up their mind that they're going to harm themselves, then it is important for us to, get help from them, even when they refuse. Unfortunately, we have to use force at this point. We are not the ones who are going to use force, but try to get, other people involved so that this person can get to the nearest hospital. Don't dare them, because sometimes I've heard of parents or my clients, teenagers especially, who come to me and they say, I threatened to commit suicide, and my mom asked how I wanted to do it. And they're going to get me whatever it is that I wanted, whether it was a rope or, we don't want to push them to that direction, because in case they go through with it, you can imagine how much that will affect us, the guilt and all. So offer empathy, of course, but also something else that happens that, sometimes somebody has threatened to commit suicide, and then they promise you to keep it as a secret. No, that's not a safe thing to do, because you can imagine if they've asked you to keep it as a secret, and then the following day you find out that they've actually gone through with it. That will definitely have an impact on you and your own well-being. So when somebody is suicidal, it's no longer a secret. You have to talk to somebody to get them help. So that, because even as a psychologist, when somebody is suicidal, I am not in a position to help this person. I have to work with a psychiatrist. I have to make sure that they go to a hospital so that they can have, all round, to be under watch 24 hours, because I cannot be able to save them. I cannot be able to help them, when it is that serious. Yes. So it's important for us to know that it is serious. Let's not push them. I know in the Kenyan society, we've seen on TV, somebody is threatening to jump off a building and they're saying, Ruka, Ruka, Ruka. It becomes a joke, but it's because I think there's so much pain. People are going through so much pain, and the empathy is not as much. Yes, that is what I would say.
Okay. Ayeta, I know you're not chopped liver. Here you go. Our lawyer in go
Yeah.
ahead.
So the
Yeah.
only thing I can just say here is sometimes if it gets to a point where it's impossible for the person to come to bring themselves to help, then you may use the law and force the help on them. So the law is very clear that you can actually appoint a guardian ad litem for people who are under depression, people who have mental health illness and stuff like that, so that you can commit them to hospital. But the problem is you may commit somebody using the law, get an order and all that. But from what Dr. Hamida and Shalom have said, I think this is something that somebody just has to decide to cut, to seek help. So even if you commit them, it may not help. But the law is clear. We have a Mental Health Act. You can use that to ensure that these people get the services and the medication or whatever requirements that they need.
Okay. And then, so if once we've done all this, we've protected the person, we've taken them to hospital, they've taken their medication, but they still die by suicide. How do we help those left behind? Not rapture style, but how do we help those left behind? How do they cope? And this includes the health professionals. I don't think we talk about it enough. The losing your clients to suicide is it's heart-wrenching. How do we talk to families? How do we talk to the communities? How do we talk to the people who are caring for these people who end up dying by suicide? Ayeta, your face is there. Do you want to start?
I honestly would like to hear from Dr. Hamida and Shalom more, because I'm a student also in this. I'm just listening and getting requirements. But I don't know how you would help. I would like to hear from Dr. Hamida and Shalom. So
Okay.
yeah.
Shalom, you look like you're unabonyeza kidude. Go ahead.
Fosa. How to help is exactly the same as how to help when somebody has lost a loved one through a normal death. If we can call death normal, right? This is a loved one who has died. I find that the difference between regular, what I'm calling normal in quotes, death and death by suicide is that death by suicide ends up leaving the loved ones feeling like there's something they could have done to prevent it, because it is quote unquote not natural causes. And so how to help those behind is just grief counseling. The same way there's grief counseling, you need counseling for grief, but a lot of it needs to be around the cognitive end of things, where we are looking at what your thoughts are around this person. Those left behind, like I like that you have broken down, there's family, there's loved ones, there's friends, and then of course there's even the mental health practitioner who would lose a client to suicide. Mental health practitioners, if I can start with that, is a little easier to talk about, because if somebody is practicing well as a practitioner, you have supervision and you have other places to deal with it. So anybody practicing professionally should also have a setup where they are handling conversations about their cases, and therefore it's much easier for them to seek the help. The person who will struggle to seek the help are people without the mental health knowledge. And for them, first and foremost, is to understand that they're not at fault. There's nothing more they could have done to help this person if they did all that they could, if they were there for this person. Secondly, is to help them understand the same thing we're talking about. This is an internal struggle that this person was going through on their own. So they were unwell. By the time they're getting to the point of taking their own lives, they were unwell. So it was an illness that got them there. It's not you, and there's nothing you could have done at that point in time if you knew about it. Now, let's say it's a loved one who had been told, I'm going to take my own life, and then they took it lightly. They're going to have to deal with the guilt. And I don't mean have to deal with it on their own. They will need therapy. They will need help, basically overcoming the guilt of they were told and they didn't take it seriously, therefore they feel as though then they could have stopped it. Then we deal with guilt in such a situation. And then there's also the ones, we don't talk about the friends who are left behind. And I think you mentioned the word contagion a little earlier, where friends who are left behind end up also doing the same thing. Because then it looks like it is a solution. It looks like the better place to be. They start having thoughts and questions about life of, I can't be without this person. Life will never ever be the same again. And so they're the ones who need support, building up their resilience and building up their strength and ability to manage stress so that then they don't take the same path. Back again to all the things that we are saying, if we can create self-awareness, help people as much as possible to understand how this comes about, then it becomes easier to deal with those who have been left behind. But like we are saying, it is grief. That is the loss of a loved one. Like any other, grief counseling is important, but with the additional fact of the guilt element, because the people who are left behind feel, I could have stopped it. It's just to understand you couldn't have. You did the best you could. And yes, it is a sad and unfortunate space.
Hamida, same question.
Yeah, thank you, Posa. Of course, when a loved one dies and you're going through grief, usually it's a very difficult time for people. So, but when a loved one dies by suicide, you'll find that may complicate the grieving process because first of all, the stigma that surrounds it, maybe people are judging you, instead of being very supportive, people are, having very negative conversations behind your back or maybe even with you. So that complicates, how you grieve at that point. And you may feel isolated because maybe there are things that you would want to discuss with especially the loved ones or the friends who are coming to your space, but you don't know how because of the stigma. You may find that you're struggling a lot with the guilt, like Shalom has said. That is a very important point. That guilt and also feeling a sense of betrayal is like, how could you? I thought that I was there for you. I thought that I did everything that you wanted me to do. What did I do wrong? So you find that now people start internalizing, the bargaining stage as well. What is it that I didn't do? Maybe if I would have done this, they wouldn't have taken their own lives. May become a very messy, a very complicated grieving process. That's why I feel like we need to encourage people to seek professional help where they do grief therapy, but to be sincere, most people don't go for such help. We have so many cases of suicides, like for example here in Kenya, but how many of those families get the opportunity to access, grief therapy? Because the access it becomes a problem. So you may find that some people now use very negative, coping mechanisms. Some people might go so much into religion, or others start using or abusing, different substances. They don't know why they're doing that. They're not even connecting it to their loss. So, of course, psychoeducation, like I've said, we need to psychoeducate our people to know, to let them know that, even when somebody has, a loved one has died by suicide, there's help, that they can get the support that they need in order for them to be able to move on with their lives, because some people get stuck once a family member has taken their own life. They don't know how to move on. How they view life is different, and how they see themselves. A lot of self-blame is also, is also, it can also become very challenging. And of course, the copycat, effect, of course, also is there, where you find other members also, or friends, also dying by suicide because their loved one did that. They see it, like Wandia has, like Shalom has said, as a solution. Yes, so we need to be there for them, support them. But if you see that this person is struggling, we need to, to encourage them to seek professional help, so that they can be able to process grief, because it can be at times very complicated, when especially it's the person has died due to suicide. Yeah.
Okay. And let's talk about the monster that is stigma. How are we gonna break the stigma? How do we stop it? And let's in institutions, Ayeta will just come back, will do for us the law and legal community, how we can break this down. But let's talk about the church, the community, the workplaces. How are we gonna combat stigma? Shalom, we can start with you.
I think combating stigma requires us to have open conversations about it. And it's talk about our own struggles. Recently, well, I don't know how recent I would call it, but there's a church whose senior pastor actually talked about his mental struggles. And interestingly, as a result of that particular sermon, like for me, I got more clients who are men coming to talk about their mental health struggles. So I would say it had a positive effect. The more we can talk about it in places like when you mentioned the church, the more we can have that conversation from the pulpit, the better it will be for the community as a whole, because then people will see they're not the only ones. The biggest problem with institutions is that the people who who impact people the most, the ones who would influence thought, portray themselves as doing well, portray themselves as being okay. So they make life look like it's an easy walkover thing. We need to be honest about the struggles that we go through as individuals, even right there at the top. Some of the people who will die by suicide a lot are successful people. And then we are left asking, they had everything they needed. Why would they want to kill themselves? So we need the people at the top to actually have conversations about their struggles, their real life mental struggles, so the people, the people at the bottom, if I may call it that, can now see, you know what, I'm not the only one. Let's normalize these conversations. But even as we are normalizing the conversations, let's create awareness. So the churches need to be holding these sort of webinars, these sort of, even seminars, live sessions, where you meet and talk about struggles that you have had, people that you have lost, provide care, provide that grief therapy in a group setting, because nobody wants to be, you already isolate yourself when something like this happens. It really helps to know that you're not the only one with the struggle. So I think making it a public conversation is something that would actually help. How else? When somebody has died by suicide and the family is struggling with the things that they have struggled with, I think even us as mental health professionals, we need to try and show up to take that opportunity to sort of like guide some conversations. So as people are having the hush conversations of shame, or can you believe what happened? This is what happened. Let's go there and try and support the people and say, you know what, this is okay. This guy, this girl was struggling, this lady was struggling with life. And we understand, and it's okay to actually talk about it. and here is how we can help. You know, the more we can talk about it, the easier it will be to remove the stigma, as opposed to hiding it ourselves. And yes, there's the legal part. So I think for church, use the pulpit to talk about it. In schools, use the parent sessions, all those things that we keep calling people to schools to have conversations about. Let us talk about suicide.
Hamida, and if you can touch, if someone can touch on Mary on Mary's question, Sharon's and Nora's question, if you're able to read them. Hamida, but just let's combat stigma, and then as you digest the questions.
Yeah, I think Shalom has put it very well. We just have to have difficult conversations around suicide. If we don't talk about it, I don't think we will be able to move forward. We have, the social media, different social media platforms that work really well. If we can be able to use those to spread the word, have conversations in the churches, in the mosques, talk about mental health as well. Because if you just look at suicide in isolation, that's where sometimes people get confused. Some people are very judgmental. They think that only weak people, commit suicide because they're not able to handle, stress and all that, which is completely, it's a myth. That's a myth. We need to demystify the myths in our community when it comes to suicide. We need to educate our religious leaders, because actually they have a very big following. They have a lot of power in influencing, the followers, because some of them, or I think a good number of them, are the ones who also do not have the awareness of what mental health conditions look like, what suicide is all about. So they have a huge impact on the people that they lead. If we can work with them, I think we would have a huge breakthrough. Our leaders as well, they need seminars where they're exposed to mental health conversations. We talk about suicide. I'm sure all of us have been touched by suicide one way or another, especially indirectly. We know of someone, whether it's somebody very close or somebody that we used to know, or we've watched something on on TV, etc. We know that suicide is there. We need to start talking about it more. So conversations. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone want to touch on? Okay, let's start with Mary's question on the boy child, like the neglected, forgotten boy child. How is it tying to the future of women's mental health, and also our projections on the impact of current related movements on women's mental health? Or do you want Mary to unmute and ask this question in Sheng?
No, I think she was quite clear, because she broke it down into like three distinct things. What I saw was the forgotten boy child, who is right now, both the boy child and becoming the man, the young man that we have today. This movement of empowering the girl child actually caused the neglect of boys, whether we want to admit it or not. And even if people throw stones about, yes, it's a patriarchal society, in the process of fighting for the girl child, we forgot the boy child. And as a result, we have ended up having young men who are frustrated, who are thrown to the sidelines, they're getting resentful. And because the neglect happened as a result of the empowering of the girl child, then the girl child has become the object of hate. And therefore, we are seeing a lot of this resentment and anger being turned towards this object of hate. It is because we have created an almost black and white situation where it is because of you that now I am struggling. If you are not doing this, if you are not getting this, then this would not happen. Somebody else has said, and I was reading somewhere about the fact that teachers are female and have been female without having male role models, then we have expected boys to respond to crisis the way girls would naturally respond to crisis. And what does that then do with all the testosterone and the aggression that they may have? We are telling them to sit down instead of allowing them to have rowdy activities that they can actually have. We are trying to contain this male child into a nice, gentle space, and that is not working. And I think that is connected to the current movement's impact. And the one that came to mind when I was reading that question that Mary asked was the femicide march that we had in Nairobi, in Kenya, actually, because there were several in different towns. And the many conversations that came about around that, about why are we, I mean, there was a school of thought of why are we calling it femicide when it's actually homicide? You know, why are we still focusing on the women? But it was because of the number of women who are actually getting killed. But where is that coming from? It's coming from this frustration. Then what happens is the future woman, because I think I took Mary's question to be in three pieces. The future woman will meet this forgotten child, forgotten boy child. So they're going to end up having a relationship with somebody who didn't learn how to be a man or how to treat a woman, and therefore get to the place where there's this very unhealthy relationship. So what should we do about it? The same thing. I think at the end of the day, the one thing that we must come out of this webinar with is that we need to educate. We need to psychoeducate. We need to have these conversations out there. Basically, if we can have conversations that will empower the boy child, show the, what's it called? Show the young ladies how to coexist with these men and show the men how to coexist with these women and not empower one at the expense of another, we're going to start heading a good direction. This future woman who's going to end up meeting the forgotten man, they need to learn how to set certain boundaries so they're knowing before they get into a deep relationship that this guy may actually need help. Then when we normalize things like therapy and when we look at, I'll talk about something like premarital counseling. Before somebody marries, we start getting into the in-depth of pain that we may be carrying into this new relationship. Then we're going to protect ourselves from each other. We're going to protect the woman from the forgotten boy child, and we're going to empower the forgotten boy child to stand up and take his place, you know, as much as possible. Because we are seeing the side effect of this forgotten child in universities. You know, they're not standing up and showing up. The girls are the ones who are fighting more. And then the world system is supporting the girls who are actually fighting for their position. And so what do we do? As much as possible, let's start educating these boys. Let's start supporting them in the different places where they need the support. And then let's, as we are teaching boundaries to this girl for her future, let's also equip the boy to be able to handle this reality that they have, because it is their new reality. And I think that's related to the question about narcissistic partners and spouses who are unable to leave because of, you know, certain circumstances, yet they drive one to have suicidal thoughts. When there's a narcissistic partner, it's very hard to try and convince them that there's something wrong with what they have done. So I find that the easier thing to do is to empower and educate the victim of the narcissism, the person who's the victim of this narcissistic partner. Back again to how are you empowering them? I think Dr. Hamida had talked about economic empowerment, access to treatment, and things like that. I would also want to add something like the first responders. Anytime we have a couple where there's a narcissistic partner and a victim, we have neighbors who have a clue. A lot of the time we have neighbors who have a clue. How do we empower society to support somebody who's struggling to get out of an abusive situation? Then when these people end up in hospital, they end up in hospital with injuries that, you know, are questionable. How are we then equipping the hospital workers to sort of like empower this victim before they get to the place where they are thinking, you know what, there's nobody to help me. I have no other way out except to kill myself. Let's try and do that as much as possible. I think that's what I would say about the boy child. Over to you, Dr. Hamida.
Okay, thank you so much, Alum. That was really, really good. Yeah, I think where women were, you know, years back, we've worked really hard to make sure that we are getting an education, we're getting into the workplaces, and we are doing well for ourselves. And then the men, it's just a general comment that sometimes I feel like they're still stuck to where, they were with their gender roles as men. They're supposed to be the the providers and all. Yet the woman nowadays, we can provide for ourselves. We don't need you to necessarily give us your money. We are okay, so the men in that way get confused. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? If you're able to pay your own rent, buy your own car, buy a property. So what is my role? I think we all need to go back to the table and have these conversations, because I think it's also contributing to the high rate of divorces, because a woman enters into a relationship, or wanting an equal partner, yet the man maybe expects the woman to take up the traditional roles of making sure they cook, they clean the house. I still do that even in my own house. We are still struggling with that, and yet I have to go to work and provide and do all these things. So we have to have serious conversations, and the men need to update themselves and know that those days of the traditional gender roles, things have changed. They also need to take up some of our roles that they're able to do, and not see that as being being degraded. Their roles, if we're able to do them together, then why not? So if you're stuck at a place where you're confused and you don't know what to do because the woman has been very much empowered, maybe it's time for us to sit down and encourage and empower the men as well. It is important for us to empower the girls. I've been a teacher, worked in a school as a school counselor. I find that the boys are a bit more shy. If you look at the performance, after exams, you see that the girls are topping and the boys are not doing very well. They're struggling. Even when you ask a question in a classroom, you find that the girls are very quick. They are very quick to answer questions, but the boys are just laid back. We need to empower them. We need to teach them some of those roles that were deemed to be female roles, so that they can be able to take care of themselves as well. And, because we need the boys and we need the girls as well at the same time. There's no gender that is better than the other one. Yeah.
And the grief question, what not to say. I think generally in grief, but what not to say when someone is grieving from a loss that was secondary to suicide.
Wow, I think sometimes we assume because maybe we have had a similar experience, then they have to be going through this, a similar journey. Yeah, you'll find that some people, or you'll hear some people say, "I know how you feel because I went through a similar situation." The truth is that you do not know what that person is going through. You do not know how it feels like. You do not know what their connection was like. You do not, there's so many factors that play to how somebody feels like or how they grieve. So saying things like those, or or they're in heaven now, or now they're not feeling the pain, they're not struggling anymore the way they used to struggle. I think we say too many things that are unnecessary, because what somebody actually needs is mostly just your presence, and for you to say, "I'm here. In case you need anything, let me know, how I can be able to support you." In our culture where, after somebody has died, there are things to be done, there are duties in the house, we have visitors coming in. When you go to such a homestead, go help to cook, make tea, serve the visitors, do something that is practical, that is going to make a difference, instead of, be of service. That's what I'm trying to say. Be of service to this person. And especially after the burial, you find that many people will not come back to this person to check on their well-being. Be that person who comes along, who gives them a call, who checks on them. If they feel like they want to talk about the person they've lost, listen, be a good listener without giving so much advice. You just pay attention. They mostly don't need answers, you know. They just need your presence. Yes, that's what I would say.
Okay. Before we continue, there's someone who's listening in and works for the Standard Media and would like to ask if our comments, I mean, the panelists, your comments can be used for a media article. Najua hatutalipwa, but are you game? Should I give them an okay?
Yeah,
Shalom. Okay.
it's fine.
Ayeta, our lawyer.
No problem whatsoever.
Okay, sawa. Okay, then because you remember I have to represent my Humailo people, we need to eat. But let's end on hope. Just let's give hope. And Shalom, because you know our new Mambo Matatu. What are your Mambo Matatus on hope? Give us hope.
Wow. How would I give us hope? I think one of the best things that's happening is we are having these conversations. The fact that we can actually be here, talk about what's going on, unashamedly call it what it is, and highlight the struggles. I think I would say first and foremost, there's a chance somewhere. There's always going to be a way out, you know? I don't think we're going to be in a place where there's absolutely no way out, even when we are seeing no way out. There's always going to be a way out. Second thing I would say is connections. Reach out to somebody. I like the fact that people are even reaching out to total strangers. Sometimes it is scary to even talk about the people that you know. I've got guys who say, you know who I am. I can't afford to tell anybody that this is what's going on in my mind. Try and be vulnerable to a total stranger, right? If family has been people that you have broken your trust, try and be vulnerable as much as possible to even a total stranger, because the more we are talking about it, the more somebody is likely to help you out. Then the other thing is, don't wait. The minute you're feeling, my life is getting tough, don't wait to the point of hopelessness. Act quickly, act immediately as much as possible. Yeah, so that you're not waiting until it's too overwhelming. So let's normalize asking for help even with the little, because then it will be very easy to ask for help with the big things, you know, as they're growing. And then let's, as much as possible, step out there. I don't know how to say this. I'm more into the positive, you know, like positive psychology, where we are basically seeking happiness by doing certain activities, by building resilience, by thinking on the brighter side of things. And that's why I think I talked about brighter connections. Step out there and do something for somebody else, do something that makes you happy, and drag yourself if you have to, but try as much as possible to do it, because this is a personal struggle that will take you making an attempt, but ask for that help. Understand that there's always going to be a way out. Suicide is not the option. There is always going to be a way out.
Thank you. Should I sandwich Ayeta? Ayeta, because you've given, you've been quiet, and understandably so, because yeah. What are your Mambo Matatu? We borrowed this from our dear President Ruto. So your 3 take-home messages, we call it Mambo Matatu.
My Mambo Matatu is for Kenyans. One, they need to redefine suicide in the legal perspective. Thankfully, there's a mental health task force that is looking into it, and they are looking into removing the word voluntary and intentional, because of course, committing suicide is not something that someone does voluntarily and intentional, as we have just had. Secondly, they're looking into doing away with Section 226 of the Penal Code, which imposes criminal liability on individuals who attempt suicide. And unfortunately, this always becomes the woman issue because they're the ones who attempt suicide more. Men actually go through it and they do it so they're not criminally liable. But so women are at a disadvantage because they will be charged a lot because they're doing that. And third, and most importantly, okay, just allow me to do 4. 3, there's the Mental Health Act. We have a lot of issues that should be activated and actualized. If that is done, then a lot of suicide cases will be prevented because people will be able to access treatment, and medical practitioners will be allowed to do a lot of investigative, not only investigative, but also treatment values that will help be able to prevent people from doing suicide. And fourth and finally, the new insurance bill, the new Insurance Act that has come into play is looking into issues of mental illness because mental illness has been declared one of the national emergency issues, and as such, people are actually able to access treatment. They're able to access, they'll be able to access treatment via national insurance and all that. So we are looking into issues where hopefully suicidal cases will be reduced. Thank you.
Hamida, mambo matatu manne, unaona people don't listen. Matano.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Osa. So I would like to just remind us that it is okay not to be okay. That the way life is, we go through stuff, we go through different struggles, and it is okay. Everyone has their story. So don't feel like you are alone in this journey. It is okay for you to reach out, if not to a professional, to somebody that you trust, that you can be able to open up. Don't keep everything inside, because sometimes when you are just, in your own mind, then our brains are very interesting. They'll come up with all sorts of, stories that you might find that, a good percentage of that story in your mind is actually not true. So seek help, have a support system, just one or two people that you can be able to talk to when you feel like, you're overwhelmed. And especially, if you're able to afford to see a therapist, I would really encourage you to do that, because then whatever it is that you're discussing is kept in confidentiality. You don't have to worry about that, because I find that mainly people fear to speak out, especially to people around them, because then it becomes, a story behind your back, and it only complicates the matter. The people who have experienced, the loss of a loved one through suicide, I would want to tell you that it is not your fault. It is not your fault. Okay. And I want to encourage everybody to remember that you are enough and that you actually matter. That is something that we need to remind ourselves every single day. Regardless of our challenges, we are enough and we matter. And problems are not permanent. They may seem huge. Sometimes you see on TV somebody has gone through a very difficult thing and there's a scandal or whatever, but with time, things get better. Nothing is permanent. So let's take care of ourselves. Yes, that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. And shout out to Peter Mbuga. He's going to be on the panel next week. If you want to comment something, or you just want to remain mpenzi msikilizaji, that's fine. So 2 things. One, from the panelists, if there's anything I left out and you want to comment on it, please do. And the intra-Zoom audience, if there's a question you want to ask, you can raise your hand up and we will ask you to go. Don't give us vote of thanks, just a question. Otherwise, we will end the meeting without very flowery thank you, because Saya is not here today and that portion was not given to me. Yes, okay. panelists, is there anything you wanted to add that I didn't touch on? Ama, you're with my Kumailo people, we need to eat.
I think for
We
me,
need to
what I
eat.
would add will come to the teens one, the teens and youth.
Okay, and that's on the 28th.
Today.
Ayeta
Yeah.
and Shalom, I'm just confirming we are on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other panelists who anything to add that we didn't touch today?
So I've
No,
just
just to
posted
say
on the chat the suicide prevention strategy 2021 to 2026 from the Ministry of Health. Perhaps people can just go through it and see what the strategies the government has for preventing suicide in Kenya at the moment.
As in, this government really has good stuff. Walipe interns, you know me, I have to put that in, right? Yeah, they have good stuff. Okay. Hamida, anything else?
no, just to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Posa, for it's not easy. I can only imagine. Good job. Let's keep this conversation going. In case anybody wants to reach out to me, they can look me up on online from Tulivu Psychological Counseling and Wellness Services, and we can be able to engage from there. But thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. And just send them to me again. I'll post them on Facebook. Shalom and Hamida. Ayeta wesi utapatikana tu if anyone is in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then on behalf of my fake co-host, who's my brother, that's why I can get away with saying all these things I say. Thank you for this conversation. And even if we are smiling and laughing through it, it's difficult, but there is hope. Spread the word, share, let's talk about it. These are the mazungumzo magumu we need to have. Let's save our lives. 1 million people dying every year is too much. Na kwa hivyo, we will see you next week. If there'll be 3 men, we are gonna clap because men are impossible. But yeah, welcome. Next week we are having the conversation on male suicide, and then the week after we'll conclude with the suicide amongst adolescents. As usual, Asante, if you have any topic you want us to discuss and panelists who can freestyle like this, just send them over to us. Otherwise, bye-bye.
Bye, Posa. Asante
Bye.
sana.
Thank you. Bye.
Haya, kwaherini.